All right, so with that being said, today's presentation, the workshop title is Managing Your Mindset, Strategies to Improve Positivity, Motivation, and Success in STEM with Ashley Erickson. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and give the virtual mic to our lovely presenter, Professor Erickson.
All right. Thank you so much, Zaira, for having us. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Really great to see that we have a good turnout and really happy to see that there's a lot of people interested in mindset. So, just a quick logistical thing. I'll paste it in the chat one more time. If you would like to download the presentation slides and follow along, please go ahead and click on this on the link that I've pasted in the chat, and you're welcome to download the Google Slides for this presentation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I really need to start thinking of shorter titles for these workshops, but again, there's a lot of good stuff here. So the focus again for today's workshop is managing our mindsets and talking about strategies to improve positivity, motivation, and success. And this is kind of presented from an angle in STEM, but really this information is applicable to just about any field. So the goal here is to provide you some very useful ideas that you can use in basically any type of situation. And once again, my name is Ashley Erickson. So I'm an instructor here in the DVC engineering department. And so I will be sharing some of my own personal experience as well as important information that has been researched and well known about mindset. All right, so goals for today. So by the end of today's session, really, I hope that you understand the importance of mindset, both to success in STEM and to success in the real world. One of the main reasons why I decided to hold this workshop was because I noticed that a lot of students tend to struggle with mindset. Everyone struggles with it, really. It's not an easy thing. And so I'd really like to share some ideas and really apply some strategies that you can use to improve your mindset. And then finally, we'll share some additional tools and resources that you might find helpful as you progress both here at DVC and also in the real world. All right, so real quick, just in case anybody forgot it, I will paste the link to our slides one last time, just in case anybody missed it. And let's go ahead and continue. So why should we bother to talk about mindset? And I hope that one of the key takeaways that you'll get from today's session is that really succeeding in STEM or any field can be incredibly challenging. I think many of us here are STEM majors, and I'm sure you know STEM is no joke, right? It's a very challenging major. But one thing that you're going to find is that in order to be happy and successful in both STEM and in the real world, we need regular intelligence. So, the skills and abilities we gain through education and experience. But we also need this thing called emotional intelligence. You may have heard this term before. Emotional intelligence is sometimes called EQ, kind of as like an emotional quotient, similar to intelligence being IQ. And there's a lot of definitions of emotional intelligence. This is just one that I found on Google. And emotional intelligence really is the way you can manage your own emotions in a positive way. It helps you relieve stress, communicate effectively, deal with uncomfortable situations, manage and improve your relationships, overcome hardship, all that good stuff. And, emotional intelligence is great, and it's a really important skill to have, but, it's not really taught in school. And I think that's a bit unfortunate because it's such an important thing to have to be successful, but we're kind of left on our own to figure it out and trial by fire and learn by experience. So my goal for today's workshop is to share some ideas. I'm an engineer, I'm not a psychologist I'm not an expert on this, but I hope that I can share some ideas both from my own experience and from well-known research. And these ideas can be useful for you to apply and improve your own emotional intelligence and really just to be happier and more successful. So with that, I'd like to start by sharing one of my own personal experiences to provide some context. So a lot of us, we're here because we're, currently a student and we're working towards a degree. And it's often hard for us to visualize what happens after you finish your degree. But I very distinctly remember a past experience I had early in my engineering career. I had only been out of school for about 6-8 months, and I had just moved to be with a new team on a new project. And I was struggling with a bunch of challenges. I was learning the ropes. I was a new engineer at a new company. I didn't know how to do stuff. And, coming from someone who was a PhD student who knew a lot about a lot of things, not knowing how to do stuff was challenging. And this third term, ambiguity. My project was complex, and there wasn't a clear path forward. It's not like school where, you just have to answer these homework questions and turn them in. This project, it was kind of poorly defined. It wasn't clear what the best solution was. And of course, I had a lot of pressure on myself. Being kind of the new engineer on the team, I wanted to learn things quickly. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to be a good team member. And we had performance evaluations coming up, and everybody's under pressure to look good. And then, of course, there's always lack of confidence, fear of failure. Those are challenging things to deal with. I needed to rely on other people in order to get my work done and collect data. And then, unfortunately, these people, they weren't very supportive. They were too busy with other stuff, and so they weren't really able to help. And so this whole situation just left me in a really difficult spot. I remember feeling unhappy, burned out, alone, isolated, just not a fun place to be, right? And, you think about what we learn in school, and we learn all this stuff about STEM and about other subjects, but nothing I learned in school really prepared me quite for this. And so what I did was I asked for help. And I was fortunate in that I was able to meet with some really experienced engineers and experts. And their advice was really interesting. And so I'd like to share a summary of what these really experienced people and what these experts advised me to do. So here's the first point. I remember sharing that my project was not going well, and I was concerned about my lack of progress. And I was kind of expecting the engineer I was talking to be sympathetic and say, "Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Why don't I help you? Why don't I connect you to these resources? And, how can I help make things better?" And they didn't say that. If anything, they said the opposite. They're like, "Well, you're an engineer. Go solve the problem." And they told me this very important point. You need to take ownership of your future. And so it was a little bit, I remember being a little bit shocked at the time because I'm thinking, oh crap, I'm just trying to get some help here. And they're telling me that I'm doing a bad job. Like I need to go solve this myself. And, I can't just wait for other people to come help. So this was a little bit surprising to me, but looking back, I realized it was actually really, really good advice. Next point, I was afraid of messing up. A lot of us are when we're new and we're trying to learn. And I was told that I needed to grow a thick skin. I needed to accept that I'm going to mess up. I need to learn from my mistakes, pick myself back up, and move on. And so, since everyone's busy worrying about themselves, I need to focus on me and what I can control. So some interesting stuff here, right? Advice that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but was really useful. Another point. I shared that I was concerned that I wasn't getting much support from my team. And the advice I received was that I shouldn't give up so easily. I need to be assertive and resourceful. Find a way to get what I need. Maybe I need to offer to help the team. Maybe I need to figure out how I can get that information. I need to be resourceful and assertive, not just wait for the information to come to me. Next point, this was a tough one. I wasn't sure what to do next. And I was told that if I don't have a path, I need to make one. And one of the experts I talked to, he had this great question. He said that I should ask myself, what does success look like? How can I get there? And once I figure that out, I can work backwards and find a path. I still ask myself that question a lot. What does success look like? It's a really powerful question. Next one, I feel unhappy and isolated. That's tough. And I think, unfortunately, this happens to all of us from time to time when we're in a rough spot. And the advice I was told was to be a problem solver. Those of us who major in STEM, we're developing all these skills to solve problems. So they told me to really embrace what's called a growth mindset and focus on how can I improve things? What can I learn? How can I use this to move to a better direction? And finally, the last question I remember asking was just about feeling burned out and overwhelmed and just kind of unhappy. And I was told that I need to be very careful about how I take care of myself. And especially, I needed to learn how to manage this thing called willpower. Because everybody only has a finite amount of willpower and a finite amount of time. So we have to be careful about how we spend our time and effort, and we need to take care of ourselves too. We can't just work all the time. So this was some really interesting and powerful advice that I received. And from this advice, I really started to learn the importance of what we call mindset and the ability to really overcome problems, not just, homework problems and problems we see in school, but real world, bigger problems that we face outside of school in the real world. So that brings me to the key takeaways that sort of motivate this session. The key things that I really learned over those months were that really having a fancy degree or a nice engineering job, it did not make problems go away. It did not guarantee success. It really made me realize the importance of emotional intelligence and strong mindset in addition to preparation and education. And, again, in school, we're often given that clear path and that clear definition of success. But as you can see from my example in the real world, we often need to define success for ourselves. We need to find our own path through ambiguity and uncertainty. And we have to keep learning and growing. And of course, looking out for ourselves. Mentors and friends are great. They can provide advice, they can help us along, but at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for ourselves. And kind of the last point again, unfortunately, is that nobody really teaches this stuff in school. And so often we need to learn by experience. But the good news, and really what I'm trying to convey in this session, is that a strong mindset can be developed. With practice and effort, you can improve your mindset and be able to overcome these situations much more easily. All right, questions so far? I'll just paste the link to the slides one more time. All right. So kind of having given this whole idea of mindset some context, I'd like to share the 4 key strategies I'd like to help everybody learn today in today's workshop. So again, I'm not pretending to be an expert on mindset. I'm not a psychologist, I'm an engineer, but I do think that these strategies can really help improve our mindset and improve emotional intelligence so that when we're faced with problems, be it homework problems, exams, life, whatever, we can overcome them in a much better way and be more successful. So these are the 4 key strategies I'd like to propose. And again, with just please be mindful of these disclaimers. You do not have to have these all perfect and apply them all at once. So starting small and incrementally improving is really key. And again, I'm not pretending to be an expert. So if you do need additional help or support, I recommend that you actually talk to a real doctor, a real medical professional, or someone who's actually a true expert on these things. I'm merely sharing my experience and things that I think are helpful. So with that, these are the 4 strategies. Number 1 is to set yourself up for success. Now, you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up so that you'll be able to succeed. Next one, manage your willpower. This one is key, and we'll talk more about willpower, what willpower is, how to improve it, how to make sure that you use it most efficiently. Third one, this one is really key. Embrace a growth mindset. So we'll talk about how a growth mindset is viewing problems as opportunities for growth, and rather than getting negative and depressed and upset, using problems as a way to brainstorm solutions and grow and stay positive, even when there's a lot of crazy going on. And finally, the last one, as that engineer once told me, really taking ownership of your future. It's very easy to blame other people or other things or other outside factors when things aren't going our way. But at the end of the day, taking ownership of our future is a really powerful way to help us head in the right direction. All right, so in the next few slides, what we'll do is we will go through each of these strategies one by one. We'll give some examples, talk about how it can be used. And please do feel free to shout out or type in the chat if there's a question as we go through these. All right, any questions before we move on to our first strategy? All right, so we're not going to spend too much time on our first strategy, but it's very important to know what success looks like. Our first strategy is setting ourselves up for success, but if we don't know what success looks like, it's kind of hard to set ourselves up for that. And so it's very important to make sure you know what success is. And again, nobody can really define that for you except for yourself. So I would recommend that you consider making a 5-year plan. You could take a look at our previous college success workshops on that if you're curious. And again, remember, success can mean different things to different people. So, it could be things like transferring or graduating, maybe landing a job, having fun, feeling creative, not being afraid of failure. I mean, these are all really important things that are important to people. So you want to make sure you know what success looks like for you. And once you know what success looks like, you want to make sure you set yourself up so that you can go in the right direction. That brings me to this point about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've taken a psychology class, you might be familiar with this theory. Again, it's a theory, so it can be debated. But the general theory states that in order to achieve your highest potential, in order to have maximum success, you first have to make sure everything else on this pyramid is taken care of. You want to make sure, of course, that you're, physically healthy and safe. You want to make sure you're getting enough sleep. You want to make sure that your relationships are doing well. And notice also this one here, your mental health, your own self-esteem, your own confidence. Like, you've got to have these things in order to ultimately reach, your highest potential. And so really, I bring this up because when we talk about setting ourselves up for success, you want to make sure that you're doing the best you can to meet these basic needs. And you want to make sure that when you define success, you're not being so aggressive that you're throwing away your basic needs and sacrificing them in order to achieve that high goal, and in the process, sabotaging your progress. And so there's another really interesting quote about this. This comes from the psychologist Jordan Peterson, and he recommends that we treat ourselves like someone who we must take care of. And this is a really interesting point. If you were taking care of a loved one or a family member who you really cared about, you definitely want to ensure their basic needs are met, that they feel loved and cared for. You want them to feel confident and positive about themselves. You want them to have healthy relationships. You want to help them plan for the future. You want to support them when they need help. And especially this one, speak kindly to them. So it's easy for us to think about this with other people, but often for ourselves, we can be unnecessarily harsh on ourselves. We can be really self-critical of ourselves. We might not take care of ourselves as well as we could. And this can really get in the way of our success. And again, I'm not saying that we have to have all of this perfect immediately, but this is a really interesting point where, next time you catch yourself being overly self-critical, think about, well, would I want to say all that mean stuff to somebody I really cared about? Maybe I need to think of this differently. Maybe I need to really try to, treat myself as someone I must take care of and make an effort to make sure I'm meeting these basic needs. All right, so just to summarize then for our first point, I really encourage you to keep this in mind as you are going through the ups and downs of STEM and DVC and being a student. Do the best you can to treat yourself like someone you need to take care of. Maybe that involves, scheduling more breaks occasionally, or being more mindful if you catch yourself being self-critical or stressed out. But it's a really powerful thing to use. Also, making sure you meet your basic needs. Make sure that you allocate time for yourself and time to take care of yourself and be human and not just be doing STEM all day, every day, nonstop. This next point is really important. Make sure that you don't overload yourself. Remember that 1 unit of class requires about 3 hours of work per week. It's not professors making this stuff up just to be mean. This is an actual expectation. In order for your classes to transfer, in order for you to learn the things you need to learn, the expectation is that for each 1 unit you take, you're going to spend about 3 hours per week on that class. And so make sure you can fit everything in, right? Because you see, if you take 15 units, that's already 45 hours of work per week. That's a full-time job. And also, I'd like to remind you that DVC has many student assistance programs, counseling, health resources, lots of other good stuff available. And so don't hesitate to take advantage of those resources as well. All right, questions before we continue? All right. So next, we're going to briefly talk about this thing called the Marshmallow study. And some of you may have heard of this. This was a 1970s Stanford experiment where some psychology researchers had children go into a room, and they were basically trying to measure self-control. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. Is it 3 hours per week per STEM class, or is that any class? So that is any class. So, but of course, STEM classes, especially kind of the ones that you might find more challenging, you might find you need even more than 3 hours per week. So you definitely want to keep that rule in mind. All right, so anyway, this Marshmallow study, we had, they would bring children into a room, and each child was brought into a room by themselves, and they were offered a marshmallow. They could eat the marshmallow right away, or if they waited 15 minutes, they would get a second marshmallow, as long as they did not eat the first marshmallow. Let's see, there's a question. Does 3 hour study include class time? Yes, so that includes like classes, labs, homework, study time. Yes. So you'll notice like some of the chemistry classes at DVC, they're like 5 unit classes, right? Because there's a lot of lab and study time required. And so really the goal of this marshmallow study was to see what happens. How does being able to delay gratification, being able to delay gratification and wait for a larger reward, how important is that for success? And so they monitored the behavior and the later lives of these children even after the study was completed. And interestingly, the study found some significant correlations between a child's ability to delay gratification and between the child's success. So the students who were able to wait for that second marshmallow, the ones who did not fall temptation to eat the first marshmallow right away, those students tended to have higher SAT scores, better stress tolerance, higher confidence, better interpersonal skills, lower likelihood of drug or substance abuse. So generally more successful. There's a lot of follow-up studies on this about like other correlations and additional factors. So, if you're curious, you can take a look at these links. But the reason I bring this up is because willpower or delayed gratification has a really important correlation with success. Let's see, do the follow-up studies talk about how to work on delayed gratification? So this is more focused on like children, but you could take a look. There's a lot of stuff in these links and online that talks about willpower in general. And we'll also cover delayed gratification in a few more slides. All right, so that brings us to our second strategy for today, and that is managing our willpower. So if we Google willpower, the definition that pops up is the control exerted to do something or restrain impulses. And another definition talks about how willpower is the ability to delay gratification in order to work towards or move towards a desired goal. And so for those of us in STEM, I think we all agree that succeeding in STEM requires tremendous amounts of willpower and lots of motivation. We got to suffer through all the hard work and all the time and effort to master the STEM curriculum. So there's 3 things that I would like you to know about willpower. First one is that willpower is finite. So it's a limited resource. Next, willpower is dependent on your environment. So depending on what's going on around you, that might improve your willpower or that might drain it. And then finally, this third point, willpower can be developed and strengthened. So some of us, especially if we're under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, we might find that we don't have a ton of willpower. And the good news is we can improve it. And we'll talk about some ways to do that. So first one, willpower is finite. So this is why you should never feel bad about scheduling time to take breaks and recover. Once your willpower is used up, you're going to need to recharge before you can continue working. It's part of being human. We're not machines. We do need this time to recharge. And this affects everyone. Some people might have higher willpower than others, but eventually everybody is going to burn out and need a break before they can keep working. And so please keep in mind that taking breaks is really important and necessary. That's why we have spring break and winter break and summer break in education, because we know that you can't go 24/7, 365 days a year. It's just not realistic. So that brings us to our next point. Willpower is dependent on your environment. This is really important. I was never told about this when I was a student. And so looking back and looking at all these things that drain willpower, I confess that I often exposed myself to a lot of things that drained my willpower without even really knowing it. And I think sometimes we can't avoid certain distractions and certain things. But notice if we can proactively, set up our environment so that we avoid some of these willpower draining things, we can be a lot more successful. So notice, of course, work, inevitably doing work is going to drain our willpower, but things like temptations or distractions, making decisions, self-criticism, that one is a big one. I'm very guilty of that. That can really drain your willpower quickly. Stress, hunger, negativity. I'm sure you could think of other things as well. And notice that really in order to restore willpower, we do have to put forth some effort. We have to take time to rest. Maybe we set up routine and habits or reward ourselves, set goals, take regular breaks, trying not to eat too much junk food, balancing nutrition, and also just overall self-awareness and positivity. And so notice that, maybe we can't avoid everything that drains our willpower. We can't just avoid work flat out, right? Like we have to put in our time and do our work. But there are things we can do to preserve our willpower. And there are things we can proactively do to make ourselves more efficient and set ourselves up such that maybe our willpower won't drain as quickly. Maybe we can accomplish more. And so here's some ideas on how you can preserve your willpower. First item, again, going back to planning and holding yourself accountable. You want to make sure you have a plan as much as you can. Set goals. This one is really key. Minimize the number of unnecessary decisions you need to make. Every time you make a decision, that's going to drain some of your willpower. So if you have habit, schedule, routine, if you can make some of those decisions in advance ahead of time, that can help save your willpower for later. And also holding yourself accountable so that you build up that discipline in order to maintain the willpower and maintain your productivity. Next point is being proactive. So this one's really key, like minimizing temptations and distractions. So like if you need to go study, it might not be the best idea to study at home if you have lots of family members, lots of distractions or loud noises nearby. You might have a little bit better luck studying somewhere quiet, maybe somewhere at DVC in one of the student centers, or somewhere where there's a little bit less distraction. And this next point, maximizing your efficiency. So this could be things like if you know, for example, that you prefer to type your notes instead of writing by hand, or if you prefer to write by hand instead of typing, do the things that make you more efficient. This next one is really tough, but also really important. Be willing to say no. Sometimes there's things that come up that we do not absolutely have to do, and we have to be a little bit mean and be willing to say no. And also surrounding ourselves with people and environments which support our goals. There's lots of really great STEM organizations on campus, so I'd encourage you, if you're looking for a group of people that are also kind of involved in STEM and have similar goals, you might want to check out some of those organizations like MESA and some of the other groups, because that's one way to really put yourself among a group of people who's kind of in the similar boat. And then this last point, track and celebrate progress. I know when we're in the thick of things and when life is crazy and exams are happening left and right, it is really hard to take a break. But I think that if you proactively and regularly schedule breaks, it will really help you maintain that willpower, maintain that motivation, maintain that energy level that you need in order to keep pursuing STEM. And also celebrating progress and offering yourself periodic rewards. This is delayed gratification. We might not immediately get the reward or the goal that we're hoping. It might take some time. So we got to reward ourselves when we're heading in the right direction. And finally, again, just figuring out what works best for you personally. We're all different. So, really take the time to also figure out what works for you. And then lastly, recharging willpower. Really important, right? Make sure you find some healthy, positive ways to recharge your willpower. so that when it's time to take a quick break or a longer break, you know what will help you get revived and rejuvenated quickly. You want to be careful of things that could make you sleepy or things that are addictive, like for example, binge watching TV or video games or, like taking naps. You want to be careful that, those things don't suck you in and you end up taking too much of a break. But, if you find healthy and positive ways to recharge, like, meditation, nutritious foods, exercise, sunlight. I really like laughter. That's a good one. If you find like some comedy or some video that just gives you a good laugh. Playing or listening to music, quality time, projects, hobbies, figure out what works for you. It's really important to know if you're feeling drained that you have these tools in your toolbox that you can use. And then finally, our last point about willpower is that willpower can be strengthened. And so I encourage you, don't feel bad if your willpower isn't as strong as you would like. It takes time to develop. And so I encourage you to, set small goals and build this decision-making muscle. If you make a decision, stick to it. And that'll help you build your discipline and accountability. We also want to make sure you set up habits and routines to conserve that willpower. Also, make sure you understand what works and what doesn't. It's always kind of sad to me if I see, like, if I have a student who's repeating a course or a student who comes in asking for help and they keep making the same mistakes over and over. And, so if you're recognizing that something is energizing you, something is draining for you, something works, something doesn't, figure out what works and optimize that. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a few slides as well. And then finally, track progress and be patient. Again, this isn't all going to be fixed overnight, but it's a great goal to work towards. All right, questions before we continue on? All right. So the next point I really wanted to cover was growth mindset and overcoming challenges. It's very easy to become negative and to become, kind of stressed out and upset when things get challenging in STEM. So I really encourage you to try to develop as much as you can this idea of a growth mindset. Growth mindset is the belief that you can cultivate and improve upon your abilities through practice and effort. It's really the belief that you can be in control and you have the ability to improve and grow from your situation. Many students often suffer from fixed mindset, where you kind of think that everything's out of your control, your abilities are predetermined, and there's nothing you can do to change it. But what you'll see is that if you adopt a growth mindset, you can really help overcome challenges and improve your emotional intelligence, overcome that negativity. Good ways to reward progress. Well, we'll talk about some more ideas a little bit later, but again, I encourage you to figure out what works for you. Everyone is different. Again, you might want to have some things that are like short, quick, cheap, inexpensive rewards, and some things that are a little bit bigger, and you kind of figure out how much incentive you need in order to make progress. Here's a couple examples of fixed and growth mindset. Fixed mindset, a lot of students will just be like, well, I don't know how to do that. And the growth mindset would be, well, okay, how can I learn? Fixed mindset, I'm not good at this. Growth mindset, how can I improve? Fixed mindset, that person's smarter than me. Growth mindset would be, well, what could I learn from that person? Maybe they're doing something better. Why do I keep messing up? That's painful, but you could ask yourself, well, how can I learn? So see how basically instead of thinking all negative and thinking, oh, poor me, my situation's bad, there's nothing I can do, it's the idea that there is always something you can do. There's something you can learn, something you can do to grow. Maybe your situation is just uncomfortable and unfortunate. Maybe there's a lot going on, but there are ways you can ask yourself, how can I improve this? How can I learn? What can I do to make this situation less crappy? And so to do that, I'd like to propose this sort of 5-step method that I like to do to help improve growth mindset. First approach, I couldn't think of a better word, so I just call it building your positivity toolbox. So these are ways to reward progress, cheer yourself up, get yourself out of that negative rut. You want to be aware of your negative thinking. So catch yourself next time you're feeling really negative or down, or when you're faced with a yucky problem and you really need some solutions. And once you catch that negative thinking, replace it with a growth mindset and unleash that positivity toolbox. Get yourself in a better mindset so that you can overcome that challenge. Once you've kind of brainstormed some ideas and thought of solutions, take action. Find a way to make it fun and rewarding, to reward yourself for overcoming and finding a way out of that problem. And then finally, reflecting and tracking progress. Making sure that you're able to go back and see what worked, what didn't work. How can I improve? All right, so we'll briefly go through this method, and then we'll also pause for a moment to let Zaira complete the survey. So real quick, we'll go through these 5 points. We'll let Zaira run the survey, and then we can wrap up for today's session. So first point is positivity toolbox. We are inevitably going to run into problems. We're going to feel down. There's people will say something, we'll screw up. Something's going to happen that we need to recover from. We need to be able to pick ourselves up and, change our mindset and make progress. So I like to keep what's called a positivity toolbox, and these are all the things you can use to cheer yourself up. Different situations will require different types of tools, but there's lots of different things you can include here. Often like meditation, breathing exercises are really good if you're super stressed out. Exercise, stretches, funny videos, reminding yourself of past achievements. Favorite songs, food is always a good one for me. Positive comments from other people, reminding you of that time when you did a really good job. And these can even be people, friends, counselors, family members. Somebody, you text them and say, hey, I'm going through a hard time. I really need to vent. Would you be able to talk? Find and build this positivity toolbox. You need to be able to pick yourself up and keep moving, even when there's lots of problems around you. And then once you have your toolbox, again, next time you catch yourself feeling negative or fixed mindset, so again, you want to recognize all these things. Recognize when you're in a negative, fixed mindset. And when you recognize when you're stressed out, worried, feeling bad, feeling really negative about yourself, or being self-critical, that's when you need to unleash the growth mindset and the positivity toolbox. You want to use those positivity tools to pick yourself up, get yourself in a better mindset. You might not be able to make the problems go away completely, but at least you can change the way you're viewing them. Yeah, a really good comment there, giving positive comments to others, like gratitude, right? Giving and gratitude can be really powerful. You want to use whatever tools you can to shift your mindset. And once you're in a better frame of mind, then you can think about, okay, fine, I realize this situation sucks, but what can I do to make it better? Yeah, maybe I didn't do so well on that exam. How can I improve? What can I do differently? What is good about this problem? How can I do better? And so finally, once you're able to come up with those ideas and new solutions, be in a better frame of mind, make a plan. Find a way to overcome your challenge. If you find you're being so self-critical and you're just feeling really negative, find a way to overcome that. Maybe it's time to take a break. Maybe you want to brainstorm some ideas. Maybe if you're stressed out, you can make a plan to take care of whatever it is that's stressing you out. Also, again, discussing with family members and giving yourself rewards to celebrate powering through. You want to find a way to make this fun and reward yourself for getting out of that negative spot. And finally, last point, making sure you reflect and track your progress. What worked? What didn't work? Are there tools you need to add to your toolbox? Tools that didn't work so well? A big part of STEM is developing your emotional intelligence and learning what you can do next time to do better. And, keeping a journal can help too, just to keep track of, how you're doing and making progress. And just recognizing that, it's important to be patient, be kind to ourselves. This stuff is hard. And, we can't necessarily make all the negative stuff go away, but at least we can try to do better at managing the negative situations when they do come up. Yeah, and as noted in the chat there, remembering past achievements. That's certainly a useful thing. Reminding yourself that, yes, I've been through this. I know I can overcome this. So let's definitely, remind yourself of those times when you did do well, and remind yourself that you are a smart and capable person. And we don't have time to cover these next few things in great detail, but I did include some tools, again, for some students who maybe are new to all of this. One tool you can try is adopting habits of expert problem solvers. So you'll notice this chart contains kind of habits of novice and expert problem solvers. And you can see that there are some noticeable differences. And a lot of it has to do with mindset. And then another one, which is really great that I'll just kind of toss in here, is Tony Robbins's problem solving process. If you're stuck, you're not sure how to approach your problem, these questions can really help you think of new ideas. I know we're running a little bit short on time, and I do want to make sure Zaira can post her survey. So Zaira, do you want to go ahead and share the survey, and we'll pause for a moment, let everyone fill it out, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up with the last couple slides.
Yeah, of course. So everyone, I went ahead and posted the link to the survey in the chat. So go ahead and check that out. Make sure to complete it. I'll put your extra credit instructor's information there so that I can then send the email with your name. And the workshop title, I added it to the chat as well so that y'all can make sure to add that to the evaluation. And if you, for some reason, let's say your internet cut off or something, you can see this, watch this on the YouTube channel. So I did put the YouTube channel on our on the chat as well. And then also follow us on Instagram. We do have a lot of cool additional workshops, and we also post a bunch of different events that are happening throughout the campus. So definitely feel free to follow us on Instagram. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. I think we can continue with the workshop. It's good. I think they should be able to do it while they're listening in.
All right, then. So we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up with our last few slides here, and then we should have a few more minutes at the end in case there's any last questions. But thank you everyone in advance for filling out that survey. It really does help us make sure that we can offer some useful workshops for everybody in future semesters. So please do take a moment to fill that out. It's really much appreciated for us. All right, so we're a little short on time, so we'll go ahead and skip this activity for now, but I encourage you as a practice. Next time you find yourself thinking with a fixed mindset, try to catch yourself. Use some of those positivity tools and find a way to use a growth mindset and think about how you can fix your problem in a positive way. Not so much about what you don't have, what you can't do, but how you can grow and how you can improve. All right, and finally, we'll move on to our last point for the day, which is taking ownership of your future. And so I'd like to just remind everybody of that quote that we talked about in the beginning. We mentioned that we should treat ourselves like a loved one that we need to take care of. And so, you certainly would not want a person you really cared about to be harsh on themselves and negative all the time. You'd want to try to cheer them up and help guide them in the right direction. And so part of that is taking full responsibility for your own future. If you had like a small child you were trying to take care of, you would not want to abandon that child and let their future go badly. You would want to make sure that that child has the best possible future. And so similarly for you, you want to make sure you do the best you can. You may not be able to adjust and control everything that happens, but we want to use what we do have and the cards that we've been dealt in order to make the best of our situation. And so I encourage you to really realize that, yes, it's tempting to blame other people when things aren't going our way. But if we really take the initiative to say, okay, you know what, this sucks. Maybe this wasn't my fault, but I'm going to try to improve this situation. How can I improve this? Because you'll see in the real world that at the end of the day, the only one who really ultimately is able to really care for you and watch out for you is you. And again, as we talked about here, really be self-aware. It's so easy to fall into negative thinking when we're in STEM. There's problems everywhere. We're always solving problems, dealing with challenging coursework. And so you really want to make sure that you take the time to be kind to yourself and care for yourself and make sure that you do schedule that time for recovery and replenishing willpower so that you can continue to move forward. And finally, once again, I am not going to pretend to be an expert on all this stuff because I am certainly not an expert. And I certainly still work on all of these things that we covered today. I'd like to emphasize that progress really does take time. And even if you can just apply one of the things we covered in today's workshop, you'll find that it's probably very helpful for improving your success and improving the way that you deal with difficult situations. So remember that you don't have to have everything perfect immediately. Take your time, take small steps, and celebrate progress. All right, so really that is all I had for today's workshop, and I hope that I can leave you with our strategies here, and really the point that mindset and emotional intelligence are really, really important to success, both in STEM and really for life in general. So I hope you'll find these strategies helpful in, not just powering through the STEM curriculum here at DVC, but also just for solving problems and, dealing with the issues that come up just as part of life and being human. And I've also linked to some DVC resources below. So I encourage you, if you're curious, we have a lot of really good resources at DVC. So I've linked in the Google Slides, you can see there's links to the advising, counseling resources, and lots of student resources for basic needs and support. Also, our college success workshops that Zyra's been putting on, lots of really good stuff on that YouTube channel. And also DVC has all sorts of resources for mental health, mindfulness, wellness, lots of good stuff here. So I would encourage you, if you're curious, you'd like to learn more, please do check out some of these great resources. And once again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, and I do encourage you that if you find that you need additional help, please do also consider talking to real medical professionals, not just this stuff here, but I do hope that this information will be very helpful for you in growing and improving your mindset. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and end here? And if there's questions, we could use the last few minutes to answer those. But I